There is a particular kind of tired that sleep cannot fix. You know the one. You wake up after 8 hours, and the weight is still there, sitting on your chest like something unseen, something you cannot name. You go through your morning, you make your coffee, you check your phone, you perform the rituals of a functioning person, and somewhere between brushing your teeth and opening your front door, a thought passes through you so quietly you almost miss it. Is this it? Not a dramatic thought, not a crisis, just a whisper, a flicker, a strange, hollow feeling that visits you in the spaces between tasks. Between one distraction and the next, between laughter and silence, between who you show the world and who sits alone at 2 a.m. wondering why comfort feels so far away. Your life, by most measures, is fine, maybe even good. You have things people would envy. You are not in danger. You are not starving. You have people who love you. And yet, and this is the part no one talks about, you feel spiritually empty in a way that frightens you. Not because life is hard, but because life is fine and you still feel this way. That disconnect is not weakness. It is not ingratitude. It is not depression, though it can look like it from the outside. What you are feeling has a name in the ancient traditions, and understanding it might be the most important thing you do this year. There is a concept the mystics of Islam called ghafla, and before you file that away as a religious term, let me translate it into something you will recognize immediately. Ghafla is not simply forgetfulness. It is not absent-mindedness. It is the particular human condition of being fully awake in your external life while being completely asleep to your inner one. It is smiling at dinner while feeling spiritually hollow inside. It is laughing at something funny while noticing, from a strange distance, that the laughter doesn't quite reach you. It is doing everything right and feeling, somehow, that you are missing something essential, like a note that should be in the song but isn't, and the absence of it is all you can hear. Al-Ghazali, the great scholar and mystic who lived in the 11th century, experienced something that we would today recognize as a full psychological collapse. He was at the height of his career, respected, celebrated, sought after, and he stopped. Just stopped. He could not speak, he could not eat properly. He walked away from everything. And what he discovered in that silence was this. He had been building his entire life outward, never inward. He had been feeding every hunger except the one that mattered. He wrote afterward that the soul has its own appetite, and when you starve it, even while feeding everything else, it begins to make itself known in the only language it has. Exhaustion, emptiness, a nameless longing. That longing you feel? That is not a malfunction. That is your soul refusing to be ignored. Now here is where it gets psychologically strange, and I want you to sit with this. The more comfortable your external life becomes, the louder the inner silence gets. Think about it. When you are in survival mode, when something is genuinely wrong, when there is a problem to solve, a fire to put out, a crisis demanding your attention, you don't have time to feel the emptiness. The noise of urgency drowns it out. But the moment things settle, the moment you achieve the thing you were chasing, the moment the drama resolves and the dust clears, there it is, waiting, patient, quiet and enormous. This is why so many people unconsciously create problems in their lives, not because they are self-destructive, though it can look that way, but because chaos, however painful, is a form of distraction from the deeper ache. Stay busy enough, anxious enough, distracted enough, and you never have to sit with the silence long enough to hear what it's saying. The soul is not loud. It does not compete with your notifications, your deadlines, your social performances. It waits. And in the moments when everything goes quiet, on a Sunday evening, in the pause before sleep, in the middle of a crowd where you suddenly feel utterly alone, it speaks. And what it says is not comfortable. You have been living on the surface of yourself. Ibn Arabi, perhaps the most profound mystic in the entire history of Islamic thought, described the human being as a mirror, but not a simple mirror, a layered one. The outermost surface reflects what the world sees: your achievements, your personality, your roles, parent, professional, friend, believer. These are real, but they are surfaces. Beneath that surface is what he called the batin, the hidden interior. And here is what is extraordinary about this idea. Ibn Arabi said that the divine itself is closer to this inner layer than you are, closer than your own thoughts, closer than your own awareness of yourself. The Quran says it directly. We are closer to him than his jugular vein. Not close the way a friend is close, not close the way a memory is close, closer than your own heartbeat, closer than the breath you just took without thinking about it. So why does God feel distant to so many people who sincerely believe? Why does prayer sometimes feel like speaking into an empty room? Why does faith feel like a structure you inhabit rather than a fire you carry? Because closeness is not the same as awareness. The sun does not stop existing when you close your eyes. The ocean does not disappear because you turned your back to it. The distance is not in the divine, it is in the direction of your attention. And for most of us, our attention has been systematically trained to look everywhere except inward. Let me be specific about what this looks like in a life. You wake up and before your eyes fully adjust to the light, you are already reaching for your phone. Not because something important happened, but because the silence of the moment felt like something to escape rather than something to enter. You get in the car and immediately play something. Music, a podcast, anything. Because driving in silence feels oddly threatening. You sit down to eat and open a screen, not because you are bored, but because being alone with your own thoughts, undistracted, has become genuinely uncomfortable. You lie in bed at night and scroll, not because you are entertained, but because the alternative, lying in the dark with your own inner life, is something you have been quietly avoiding for years. This is ghafla, not a theological abstraction. This, the systematic, habitual, culturally encouraged turning away from the interior. And here is what it costs you. It costs you the only relationship that would actually make you feel at home in your own existence. Rumi wrote, and I want you to hear this not as poetry, but as a psychological diagnosis. Why are you so enchanted by this world when a mine of gold lies within you? He is not talking about spiritual wealth in a vague, inspirational sense. He is talking about something precise. There is a depth in you that you have not visited in years, maybe ever. And the exhaustion you feel is partly the exhaustion of a person who keeps going back to the same empty well, wondering why they're still thirsty. Now I want to talk about something that no one explains clearly, and it is the actual mechanism of soul exhaustion. Your energy, not just physical energy, but the deeper kind, flows in the direction of your attention. Whatever you repeatedly give your awareness to begins to shape your inner world. The mystics knew this. Modern psychology confirms it. What you consistently attend to becomes your reality. When your attention lives almost entirely in external things, how you appear, how you are performing, what others think, what you have achieved, what might go wrong, what you might be missing, the inner world does not disappear. It does not wither. It turns inward on itself. And it begins very quietly to consume you. This is overthinking. Not the occasional kind, but the chronic, circling, suffocating kind that feels like being trapped in a room where every wall is a mirror. That relentless inner narrator that evaluates, judges, replays, anticipates. That voice is not your soul. That is the ego, what Islamic psychology calls the nafs, running wild without the grounding of something deeper. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq described the nafs as like fire, essential, powerful, transformative when disciplined, but capable of burning everything down when left uncontrolled. And an uncontrolled nafs does not feel like rage. It feels like exhaustion. It feels like the inability to be present. It feels like wanting to rest but never actually resting, even when you sleep. The exhaustion you carry is not from doing too much. It is from being too fragmented, parts of you pulling in different directions. The self you show at work, the self you are at home, the self you are online, the self that exists only in private, that wants things the public self would never admit, the self that prays and the self that doubts, the self that believes and the self that quietly despairs. Integration is not a psychological luxury, it is a spiritual emergency, because a fragmented self cannot be at peace, no matter how well arranged its external life becomes. There is a passage in the Quran that has always struck me as one of the most psychologically precise statements ever made. Verily, in the remembrance of God do hearts find rest, not comfort, not happiness, not achievement, rest. The Arabic word is tumanina, and it describes a particular kind of settledness, a quieting of the restlessness, a return to ground. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of something underneath the pain that holds you. The way the ocean floor is still even when the surface is storming. This is what is missing. Not information about God, not more religious activity performed mechanically. The actual felt experience of a heart that has found something to rest in. And that experience, that specific quality of inner settledness, cannot be achieved through the surface of life. It cannot be bought or earned or socially constructed. It arises from a particular kind of attention, a turning inward, a willingness to be still long enough to notice what is already there. Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, the 12th century master, described his early spiritual practice not as elaborate ritual, but as sitting, simply sitting in the presence of what is real, until the noise of the constructed self began to quiet. He said that the door to God is found in a place most people run past every day, the interior of their own heart. And here is the twist that changes the shape of everything. The exhaustion you feel is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It is evidence that something is right with you. It is the signal of a soul that has not given up. A soul that still knows the difference between what it is being given and what it actually needs. A soul alive enough to be unsatisfied. The person whose soul has truly gone numb does not feel the ache. They have made peace with the surface. They have settled so completely into external life that the interior has stopped knocking. That is the real spiritual emergency, not the longing, but the absence of longing. If you are watching this and feeling that unnamed weight, that hollow ache, that quiet but persistent sense that something is missing from your life, even when your life looks fine, that feeling is not your enemy. That feeling is a compass. It is pointing somewhere. Now, practically speaking, because mysticism that cannot be lived is just poetry, what does it mean to address this? It does not mean abandoning your life. It does not mean retreating from the world or becoming someone unrecognizable. The mystics were not generally people who escaped. They were people who went deeper. They engaged with the world more fully, not less, because they were no longer using the world to hide from themselves. The first thing is the hardest, learning to tolerate your own interior. To sit, even for 5 minutes, without reaching for something external to fill the space. Not meditation in the performance sense, not a technique to perfect, just stopping. Allowing the silence to exist without immediately drowning it. Because in that silence, something becomes audible that was always there. Not a voice exactly, more like a quality, a presence. The thing the Quran describes as closer to you than your own jugular vein, closer than thought, closer than breath. You have been running past the door your entire life, and the door was never locked. The second thing is integration. Beginning to notice the fragmentation and gently refusing to maintain it. Not forcing yourself to be consistent in a rigid, performative way, but allowing the self that prays and the self that doubts to exist in the same room. Allowing the self that believes and the self that grieves to speak to each other. The integration of opposites, which Ibn Arabi called the highest spiritual work, is not the resolution of all tension. It is the willingness to hold tension without it destroying you, because you are not one thing. You are a universe, and a universe is not meant to be neat. Let me close with an image. Imagine you have been living in a house your entire life, but you have only ever occupied the front rooms, the ones with the good lighting, the ones that face the street, the ones where you can be seen and known and evaluated, the rooms you have decorated carefully because others visit them. And all the while, at the back of the house, there is a room you have never opened, not because you forgot it was there, but because something about the door made you nervous. Because you suspected that what waited on the other side might change you in ways you couldn't control. Might ask something of you, might reveal something that your carefully maintained front rooms could not contain. The exhaustion of your soul is the exhaustion of a person who has been hosting guests in the front rooms while belonging entirely and completely to that room in the back. You were not made for the performance of living. You were made for the depth of it. Imam Ali said something that has stayed with me, and I want to leave you with it. The one who knows himself knows his Lord. Not the self you present, not the self you have constructed, the self beneath all of that. The one that exists in the silence between your thoughts. The one that looks out through your eyes and has always been watching, always been there, and has never once been fooled by any of the substitutes you offered it. That self is not lost. It is waiting, with extraordinary patience, the way the dawn waits behind the longest night, not anxiously, not desperately, but with absolute certainty that the light is coming. You don't need to fix anything right now. You don't need to arrive somewhere. You only need to stop running long enough to realize you were already home. Sit with that for a moment. Which part of this reached you? The exhaustion of fragmentation? The image of the room you've never opened? The idea that your longing is not a problem but a compass? Tell me in the comments, what does your soul feel like it's been trying to say to you in those quiet moments when everything else goes still?